The large meeting hall fell silent as the 7 council members entered the chamber. John Mercer stood alone at the center platform, his blue diplomatic uniform stark against the curved alien architecture. As Earth's ambassador, he had spent 3 years learning the customs of the 23 species that made up the Galactic Council. Now all that work seemed useless. The council had already made their decision before he even spoke. Councillor Zethal, a tall being with silver skin that reflected the room's light, stepped forward. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he unrolled a document made of something like thin metal. The council has reached its verdict regarding the human question, Zethal said, his translator making his voice sound flat and emotionless. Humanity has demonstrated dangerous unpredictability in their short time among the stars. The Voldrani incident alone cost 17 lives. This pattern of behavior cannot be tolerated within civilized space. John tried to speak but found his voice communication panel had been deactivated. They would not even let him defend his people. Therefore, by unanimous decision, all human colonies and ships must withdraw from council space within 60 days. The species known as humans are hereby exiled to the outer rim territories beyond the Cressida boundary. This judgment is final. The metal document rolled shut with a snap that echoed through the chamber. John stood frozen as the council members turned away without another word. 60 days. They had 60 days to move over 15 billion humans from their colonies to the lawless frontier regions that even the council avoided. 3 hours later, John sat in the small communication room of the Earth Embassy, his face grim as he spoke to the United Earth government leaders on the secure channel. Their faces showed the same shock he felt. "They can't do this," said President Lover Bennett. "Our colonies on Proxima B and Tau Ceti are established and peaceful. The Voldrani incident was a misunderstanding, not an act of war." Admiral Paul Wright, commander of Earth's Space Fleet, leaned forward into the camera view. "Misunderstanding or not, we don't have the military strength to fight the Council. Their technology is still centuries ahead of ours in many areas. If we resist, they'll wipe us out completely." John nodded sadly. "The choice is exile or extinction. And they've given us only 60 days. The journey back to Earth took John 10 days in his diplomatic vessel. He spent the time reviewing maps of the Outer Rim territories. The region was known for harsh planets, limited resources, and constant raids from groups like the Siphon Pirates. The Council had essentially sentenced humanity to slow death rather than quick extinction. When John landed in Geneva, crowds had gathered outside the United Earth government headquarters. News of the exile had spread, causing panic in major cities. Across the planet, security forces escorted him through angry protesters to the emergency meeting room where Admiral Wright was already organizing the evacuation. "We can do this," Wright said as John entered, his voice firm with forced confidence. "We have enough ships to move our people if we convert cargo vessels to temporary passenger transports. The bigger problem is where we'll settle once we reach." The rim, large screens showed star maps of the assigned territories. Most planets in the region were barely habitable, with extreme climates or dangerous wildlife. Others had toxic atmospheres that would require extensive terraforming. "What about the other exiled species?" John asked, pointing to several marked areas on the map. "The Council has banished others before us." A woman stepped forward from the group of scientists and military planners. "I'm Susan Blackwell, Colonial Development Director," she said. "We've identified 3 other species exiled within the last century. The Nixara, bird-like beings with advanced navigation skills. The Tellurians, amphibious creatures known for biological sciences. And some scattered groups of methane-breathing Viridians. Have they formed any alliances?" Admiral Wright asked. Susan shook her head. "They're struggling to survive. The Siphon Pirates raid their settlements regularly, taking resources and technology. None have managed to establish strong colonies. The next 6 weeks passed in frantic activity. Ships from Earth's fleet traveled to all human colonies, evacuating billions of people with only what they could carry. Larger equipment and infrastructure had to be abandoned. Some colonists refused to leave homes they had built over generations. When Council enforcement ships arrived at these holdout colonies, they used energy weapons to destroy all human structures from orbit, forcing the survivors to flee with even less than those who had left willingly on the flagship Defiance. Admiral Wright gathered his officers as the massive evacuation fleet prepared to depart Council space. Through the viewport, they could see thousands of ships carrying humanity's population toward the Cressida boundary, the official border between civilized space and the Outer Rim. "They've given us the scraps of the galaxy," Wright said, looking at the holographic display of their destination. "But they've forgotten what humans do best. We survive where others cannot." Lieutenant Kathy Rogers, a young navigation officer, spoke up. "Sir, at our current speed, the journey to the assigned sectors will take 3 months. Our supplies are limited. Then we'll need to find more along the way," Wright replied. "Set course for the nearest Nixara settlement. If they're struggling as much as our reports suggest, perhaps we can help each other." The journey was difficult. Council patrol ships followed the human fleet to the boundary, making sure no vessels attempted to turn back or hide in Council space. Food rationing began in the second week. Water recycling systems worked overtime. On crowded ships designed for crews of hundreds but now carrying thousands, tensions rose. 2 months into their journey, the fleet encountered their first rim inhabitants. A small group of Nixara ships approached cautiously. The avian species had been exiled 15 years earlier for religious conflicts with the Council. Their vessels showed signs of battle damage and hasty repairs. Through careful communication, Admiral Wright arranged a meeting with the Nixara leader, a female named Cariel. Her feathers were dull from malnutrition, but her eyes showed sharp intelligence as she spoke with the human delegation. "The Scythans attacked our main settlement last month," Cariel explained through a basic translator. "They took our food stores and damaged our water processing facility. Many of my people are sick or hungry." Wright saw an opportunity. "We have engineers who can repair your water systems. We can share some medical supplies. In exchange, we need information about the territories ahead, safe places to establish colonies." Cariel considered the offer. "The Council sent you away as they did us? They fear what they cannot control. Perhaps together we might survive where separately we would perish." This first cautious alliance gave the human fleet valuable information about dangerous regions to avoid and planets with viable resources. When they finally reached the harsh desert world designated as New Horizon, their first major settlement site, they were better prepared than the Council had intended. As the colony ships landed on the scorching sands, Susan Blackwell stepped out onto the planet's surface. The heat hit her like a physical force despite her environmental suit. Around her, thousands of colonists emerged from the ships, looking at their new home with a mixture of fear and determination. Susan removed her helmet despite the warnings of her staff. She needed the colonists to see her face. She needed them to believe what she was about to say. "We begin here," she announced. Her voice carried through the comm systems to all the gathered people. "Not as refugees, but as pioneers. The Council thought they were ending our story. They were wrong. This is just the first page." 5 years passed since the first human boots touched the sands of New Horizon. What had started as a desperate camp of survival had grown into a functioning colony of nearly 2 million people. The early years had been brutal. Dust storms ravaged the settlement every 30 days when the planet's 3 moons aligned. Water was scarce and had to be extracted from deep underground reservoirs. Disease spread quickly in the crowded conditions. Many died, many more wanted to give up. But giving up was not a human trait that had survived the journey to the rim. Kevin Hayes stood on the roof of the water reclamation facility he had designed, watching the sun rise over the eastern dunes. The massive structure hummed beneath his feet, processing and purifying enough water to support the entire colony. When he arrived on New Horizon, Kevin had been a junior engineer fresh out of training. Now at 32, he ran the most important facility in the settlement. "Morning report looks good," said Maria Chun as she climbed up to join him. She handed him a datapad showing the daily output numbers. 98% efficiency. The new filters are working better than expected. Kevin nodded, taking a drink from his canteen. 5 years ago, water had been strictly rationed. Now every colonist received a daily allocation that kept them healthy. His team had even started an experimental farm in biodomes on the colony's edge, growing actual food to supplement the protein paste that had been their main diet. "Governor Wright is coming today," Maria said, checking her comm unit. "Apparently. He has news from the other colonies." After the exile, Admiral Paul Wright had been appointed governor of all human settlements in the Rim. He traveled constantly between the 12 major colonies that had been established, coordinating resources and defense. The New Horizon colony was the largest, but other settlements had been created on very different worlds. The frozen planet Coldfall housed 300,000 colonists. The jungle world Haven had nearly 1 million. Each colony faced unique challenges based on their environment. Kevin and Maria made their way down from the roof and through the busy streets toward the landing pad where Governor Wright's ship would arrive. The settlement had grown from temporary shelters to permanent buildings made from local materials. Streets followed a careful grid pattern. Power lines connected buildings to the solar array fields that surrounded the colony. Children born after the exile played in designated recreation areas. Their laughter, a sound that had been rare in the early days. Governor Wright's shuttle descended precisely at noon, kicking up swirls of sand as it landed. Kevin noticed it had escort fighters flying alongside it, something new since his last visit. The situation with the Siphon pirates must be getting worse. Wright emerged from the shuttle looking older than his 60 years. The constant travel between colonies had taken its toll. Behind him walked Commander Ellen Frost, head of the small defense fleet that patrolled human territory. Her presence here was unusual and suggested this meeting was more important than a regular colony inspection. "Welcome to New Horizon, Governor," said Mayor Frank Wilson as he greeted the visitors. "We've prepared the community hall for your address." An hour later, Kevin sat with other department heads in the front row of the community hall. The room was packed with colonists eager to hear news from other settlements. Governor Wright stood on the small stage, his expression serious. 5 years ago, the Council exiled us to the Rim, expecting us to fail, Wright began. They expected us to fight over resources, to be picked off by pirates, to die quietly and be forgotten. Instead, we have built 12 thriving colonies. We have developed technologies suited to our new environments. We have survived, but survival is no longer enough. Wright activated a holographic display showing a star map of the Rim territories. Several areas were highlighted in red. Scythian pirate attacks have increased by 300% in the past year. They've hit the Nixara settlements hard and completely destroyed one of the smaller Tellurian colonies. Our own outpost on Seti Minor was raided last month. 27 dead, critical supplies stolen. A murmur ran through the crowd. Wright waited for quiet before continuing. "Commander Frost has led our response to these attacks. I'll let her explain our new approach." Ellen Frost stepped forward. She was younger than Wright, maybe 40, with short gray hair and the focused expression of someone who rarely wasted time or words. "Until now, our strategy has been defensive," she said. "We've protected our colonies as best we could with limited ships and weapons. That changes today. 2 weeks ago, the patrol vessel Intrepid was defending a Nixara settlement when 3 Scythian ships attacked. Instead of breaking off after driving away the raiders, Captain Alan Reed pursued them to their hidden base. The hologram changed to show images of a small moon with artificial structures built into its surface. The raid was successful beyond our expectations. We recovered stolen technology from dozens of exiled species, including salvaged council ships with intact data. Cores. These cores contained information the council never intended us to have. A tall man with dark hair joined Frost on the stage. Kevin recognized him as Jack Donovan, former intelligence officer who now coordinated communication between colonies. "I've spent the last 2 weeks decrypting these cores," Donovan said. What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about our exile. The Council has been systematically banishing species with technological potential for centuries. They keep the core systems as their exclusive domain while forcing problem species to fight over scraps in the rim. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Mayor Wilson had to call for order several times before Donovan could continue. The Nixara weren't exiled for religious conflicts as they believed. They were developing faster-than-light navigation systems that would have rivaled Council technology. The Tellurians were making breakthroughs in biological engineering. Every exiled species had something the Council feared. Governor Wright took over again. We've invited representatives from all exiled species to a summit next month on Haven. We believe that, together, we have a chance not just to survive in the Rim, but to build something better than what the Council created. After the meeting, Kevin joined a smaller group of colony leaders in the mayor's office. Governor Wright explained the practical implications of their discovery. The Council technology we recovered includes scientific data they've kept secret for generations. Engineering specifications, star charts, biological research. With this knowledge, combined with what each exiled species has developed independently, we could advance faster than the Council ever imagined. They'll notice eventually, said Maria. If we start developing advanced technology, they'll see U.S. as a threat, Wright nodded. Which is why we need to be strategic. Any visible activity should appear to be simple survival. Our real work needs to stay hidden until we're strong enough that it doesn't matter if they notice. Commander Frost unfolded a detailed plan on the table. We're establishing a research station in the Helios Nebula. The radiation interference will hide it from Council scanners, Dr. Olivia. Marsh from Coldfall Colony has already developed biogenetic adaptations that allowed crops to survive extreme environments. Imagine what she could do with access to Tellurian biological science. Kevin studied the plans. My water reclamation system could be improved with some of this Council technology. We could help terraform more worlds. Exactly, said Wright. Each colony will focus on their area of expertise, but will share all advancements. The Nixara have already agreed to provide navigation charts and join our alliance. The Tellurians are eager to work with Dr. Marsh. As the meeting concluded, Kevin walked with Maria back toward the water facility. The setting sun cast long shadows across the colony. Do you think it will work? Maria asked. An alliance of exiled species against the Council? Kevin watched a group of children running past, playing some game they had invented. These children had never seen Earth, never known any home but this harsh desert world. Yet they laughed and played as children always had. The Council made one fundamental mistake, Kevin said. They put all the problem solvers in the same place and gave them a common enemy. I think they're about to learn why that was a very bad idea. 10 years had passed since humanity's exile to the Outer Rim. What had once been a death sentence had transformed into something the Council never expected. The Rim Alliance, formed from 7 exiled species with humans at its center, had grown from a desperate cooperative into a thriving network of colonies and research stations. Their combined knowledge and diverse approaches to problems had created a technological boom, unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Dr. Ryan Collins floated in the observation bubble of the research station breakthrough, watching the stars through the transparent dome. The station orbited a small neutron star in a region rich with exotic particles. Perfect conditions for his work. Behind him, a team of 20 scientists from 4 different species worked at various stations around the main laboratory. The room hummed with energy and purpose. The simulation is ready, Dr. Collins, said Zick, a Nixara scientist whose blue feathers were carefully groomed around the breathing apparatus he needed in the human standard atmosphere. Shall we proceed? Ryan pushed away from the observation window and glided through the zero-gravity environment to the central control area. The screen showed a complex mathematical model representing their latest version of the quantum fold. Drive. If it worked as designed, it would allow ships to travel distances in days that would take Council vessels months to cover. Begin the test, Ryan said, settling into his seat. Full power to the containment field. The station vibrated slightly as energy flowed into the test chamber. A small prototype drive, no bigger than a human fist, floated in the center of the sealed room. Monitors showed its energy signature pulsing with increasing strength. Quantum. Field stabilizing, reported Meera Patel, Ryan's human assistant. Drive is functioning within expected parameters. Ryan held his breath as the numbers climbed. 3 previous prototypes had failed at this stage, the quantum fields collapsing into useless energy. But this time the readings continued to rise, the artificial gravity around the drive bending precisely as their calculations had predicted. "We've achieved full stability," Zik announced, his feathers fluffing with excitement. "The drive is creating a sustainable quantum pocket." A cheer went up from the assembled team. 10 years of work, combining human theoretical physics with Nixoran navigation concepts and Tellurian biological computing, had finally paid off. The quantum full drive wasn't just an improvement on existing technology. It was something entirely new. "Send word to Governor Wright," Ryan said, unable to keep the smile from his face. "Tell him Project Breakthrough lives up to its name." Across the Rim territories, other Alliance research projects were making similar advances. On the manufacturing world of Forge, Samantha Weiss stood on the factory floor watching her automated assembly systems piece together the hull of a new ship design. The metallic skeleton took shape with remarkable speed, robot arms welding sections. Together with precision impossible for organic hands. Samantha had been an automotive engineer on Earth before the exile. Now she oversaw the largest manufacturing facility in the Alliance, combining human assembly techniques with Scythian metallurgy. The Scythans, once their enemies, had provided unexpected assistance after a group of captured raiders saw the potential in joining the Alliance rather than continuing their pirate ways. "The new alloy is holding up well," said Kraz, a former Scythian captain who now served as her materials expert. His gray skin was marked with the ritual scars of his people, but he wore the uniform of the Alliance engineering corps. "Much stronger than previous versions, and it maintains flexibility in extreme temperatures." Samantha nodded, making notes on her datapad. "Double production on all shipyards." "Now that we have the quantum full drive prototype working, we need vessels that can handle the stress it generates." The ships taking shape in her factory looked nothing like the utilitarian vessels humans had arrived in 10 years earlier. These were sleek, adaptable craft with organic curves inspired by Tellurian design philosophy. They could operate equally well in space, atmosphere, or even underwater if needed. Most importantly, they were fast. Even without the new drive, they could outmaneuver anything the Council had fielded during the exile. "Governor Wright has approved the expansion of the Haven training facility," Kraz said as they walked through the production line. "They're bringing in more recruits from all Alliance species." The Rim Defense Force had been Governor Wright's vision from the beginning. Unlike the separate military forces that each species had maintained before exile, the RDF was a truly integrated organization. Combat units mixed species based on their natural abilities and strengths. Command positions were assigned by merit rather than politics or tradition on the moon of Haven. The main training facility had grown from a small outpost to a sprawling complex. Drill fields stretched across the low-gravity environment, allowing troops to practice maneuvers impossible on standard worlds. Firing ranges tested weapons developed specifically for the unique physiology of each species. Command centers ran constant simulations of potential threats, updating tactics based on new intelligence. Council observer ships occasionally appeared at the edges of rim space, monitoring the exiled species from a distance. Standard procedure was to show them exactly what the Alliance wanted them to see: mining operations, agricultural colonies, small patrol ships with visible wear and outdated weapons. The Council representatives always departed quickly, apparently satisfied that the exiles were merely surviving, not thriving. This carefully maintained facade was coordinated from the Alliance headquarters on Haven. In the central command room, Governor Wright, now in his 70s but still sharp-minded, reviewed reports from across rim space. Commander Ellen Frost stood at his side, her position now formalized as Supreme Commander of the Rim Defense Force. "The Council sent another observation vessel to the Tellurian homeworld yesterday," Frost reported. "They stayed in orbit for 6 hours, then departed on a direct course back to core space." Wright nodded, studying the star map that dominated the center of the room. "And what did they see?" "Exactly what we wanted them to see. Struggling colonies, limited technology. No sign of our research facilities or shipyards?" "A communications officer interrupted with an urgent message. "Governor, we're detecting an unusual stellar event in Sector 7. A gamma-ray burst is forming that will hit the Tellurian homeworld in approximately 72 hours. The room fell silent. Gamma-ray bursts were among the most destructive natural phenomena in the galaxy. If it struck an inhabited world, it would strip away the atmosphere and irradiate the surface. Nothing would survive." "How many Tellurians are on their homeworld?" Wright asked. "Nearly 8 million, Frost answered grimly. "Most of their population." Wright didn't hesitate. "Deploy the evacuation fleet immediately. Every available ship with a Tellurian-compatible life support system, Priority 1. The next 72 hours saw the largest coordinated operation in Alliance history. Ships from every colony converged on the Tellurian homeworld. The newly commissioned vessels from Forge were pressed into service, their maiden voyages becoming rescue missions. The quantum fold drive prototype was installed on the command ship, allowing it to coordinate the effort across vast distances. As the deadly radiation front approached, Alliance ships lifted off from the Tellurian world in a continuous stream. Families were packed into cargo holds converted to living quarters. Essential cultural artifacts were preserved where possible. The evacuation continued around the clock, pilots flying until they could barely keep their eyes open before being relieved by fresh crews. 3 hours before the gamma-ray burst was due to hit, the last Alliance vessel departed the doomed planet. Against all odds and predictions, they had evacuated the entire population. 8 million Tellurians had been saved and distributed across Alliance worlds equipped to handle their amphibious needs. What the Alliance didn't know was that a Council diplomatic vessel had been in a nearby system during the crisis. It had observed the entire evacuation from afar, watching in stunned disbelief as the supposedly struggling exiles performed a feat that would have been impossible for the Council fleet itself. For the first time in 10 years, the Council realized that something unprecedented was happening in the Rim, something they had never intended when they exiled these species to what they thought would be a slow death, something that might soon become a threat to their comfortable dominance of the galaxy. The emergency alarm woke Natalie Reed from a deep sleep. Red lights flashed in her small quarters on the Alliance outpost station orbiting the ice moon of Coldfall. As intelligence chief for the Rim Defense Force, she knew an alarm at this hour meant serious trouble. She pulled on her uniform and rushed to the command center, her mind already reviewing potential threats that might have triggered the alert. The command center was in controlled chaos when she arrived. Screens showed multiple distress signals coming from the outer colonies. Commander Frost stood at the central table, her face grim as she studied tactical displays. "What's happening?" Natalie asked, joining her at the command table. "We're under attack," Frost replied, expanding the tactical display to show the full extent of the situation. "Not just raiders this time. This is a full-scale invasion force. At least 30 capital ships with fighter support hitting 3 sectors simultaneously." Natalie studied the display with growing concern. The attack pattern was too coordinated, too powerful to be the usual Sathan pirates they had dealt with for years. "Who are they?" "Sithens, but not like any we've seen before. These are military vessels, not cobbled-together raider ships." Frost pulled up an image captured by an Alliance patrol before it was destroyed. The Scythian ships were massive, with distinctive angular designs that looked both alien and somehow familiar. "I need to interrogate the Scythian prisoners we captured last month," Natalie said. "This isn't random. They're targeting our key production facilities and research stations." Within an hour, Natalie stood in the detention level facing Korvac, a high-ranking Scythian captain captured during a failed raid on a fuel depot. Unlike most Scythian raiders, Korvac wore military insignia and had the bearing of a trained officer. "Your people are dying out there," Natalie told him, showing video feeds of the ongoing battles. "Tell me what's happening, and maybe we can save some of them." Korvac's gray face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered to the screens. "It was inevitable. You grew too strong, too quickly. The tribute arrangement was threatened." "Tribute arrangement? What are you talking about?" The Scythian captain seemed surprised by her question. "You truly don't know? The Council has been paying tribute to the Scythian Empire for centuries. Resources, technology, even territory. In exchange, we focus our raids on the rim worlds, keeping exiled species weak and divided. It has been this way since before your kind reached the stars." Natalie felt cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. The implications were staggering. "The Council has been using you as their enforcers. More like their guard dogs," Korvac said with a bitter laugh. "We get the scraps from their table to keep us from biting the hand that feeds us. But now your alliance has grown too powerful. Our Emperor sees you as a threat to the arrangement. The full might of the Scythian Empire has come to eliminate this threat." Natalie rushed this new information to the alliance leadership. In the main briefing room of Haven's defense headquarters, Governor Wright, Commander Frost, and other key leaders gathered to assess the situation. The holographic displays showed alliance forces retreating from multiple fronts, unable to stand against the overwhelming Scythian assault. "The outpost on Taris has fallen," reported Daniel Green, the young commander who had led the initial defense. His uniform was torn and his face smudged with soot from battle. "We evacuated 60% of the civilians before we had to pull out. The Scythians have taken the shipyards intact." "Coldfall is holding, but barely," added another officer. "The ice storms are giving our forces some cover, but the Scythians have technology specifically designed to counter our defense systems." They knew exactly what they were facing. Governor Wright, now using a mobility aid to compensate for his advanced age, studied the tactical displays. "This isn't just an attack. It's an extermination. They mean to wipe us out completely." "The Council has been lying to everyone for centuries," Natalie explained. "They've kept the core world safe by sacrificing the Rim to Scythian raids. Now that we've built something worth protecting, the Scythians see us as competition." "Commander," Frost pointed to several key defense positions on the map. "We need to pull back to our core worlds. Abandon the outer colonies and consolidate our forces. It's the only way we'll have a chance against their numbers." The retreat was difficult to order but necessary for survival. Alliance ships fought desperate rearguard actions as civilian transports evacuated as many people as possible from threatened worlds. The quantum fold drive, now installed on key command vessels, allowed the Alliance to coordinate their actions across vast distances. But even with their advanced technology, they were outnumbered and outgunned on the jungle world of Haven. Now serving as the Alliance's main stronghold, William Carter worked through the night in the Strategic Command Center. As chief strategist for the Alliance, he had spent years preparing for various threats, but even he hadn't anticipated the full might of a hidden empire. "We can't beat them in a straight fight," he told the assembled leadership team. "But we don't have to. I've been analyzing their attack patterns and communication protocols. There's a weakness we can exploit." The plan Carter proposed was risky but offered their best hope. For the next 2 weeks, Alliance forces continued their strategic retreat, giving ground while appearing more desperate and disorganized than they actually were. Behind the scenes, engineers and scientists worked frantically to modify their defense systems. Based on Carter's insights, the decisive moment came at what would later be called the Battle of Haven, the main Scythian fleet, believing they had the Alliance on the run, pushed into the Haven system with their full force, 30 capital ships and over 200 support vessels against the remaining Alliance fleet of just 18 capital ships. What the Scythians didn't know was that Haven's moon had been transformed into one massive trap. As the Scythian fleet moved into position to bombard the planet, Commander Green gave the signal. Activate the quantum disruption field, he ordered from the bridge of the Alliance. Flagship Defiance, hidden generators on Haven's moon and throughout the asteroid belt activated simultaneously, creating a web of quantum disturbances that played havoc with Scythian targeting systems. Their advanced weapons, so effective in previous engagements, suddenly couldn't lock onto Alliance ships, Alliance vessels, appearing seemingly out of nowhere thanks to their quantum-fold drives struck from unexpected vectors. Smaller craft piloted by Nixara, whose natural spatial awareness made them exceptional pilots, darted between the confused Scythian ships, deploying specialized EMP weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. For the first time since the invasion began, the Alliance had the upper hand. The supposedly invincible Scythian armada found itself trapped and vulnerable. Within hours, the tide of battle had turned completely. On the bridge of the Scythian command ship, Supreme Commander Vrax watched in disbelief as his fleet was systematically disabled and captured. Ships that had never known defeat were now drifting, powerless in space or fleeing in disarray. In desperation, he opened a secure channel to send a message that would seal the Alliance's suspicions. Emergency transmission to Galactic Council. The Exiles have developed technology beyond projected capabilities. Request immediate reinforcement to maintain containment protocol. The tribute agreement is at risk. Repeat, request immediate reinforcement. This transmission, intercepted by Alliance intelligence, confirmed everything Natalie Reed had learned from the captured Scythian captain. The Council's centuries of deception were now exposed, not just to the exiled species but potentially to their own citizens, who remained unaware of the tribute paid to keep the Scythians at bay. As Alliance forces secured their victory and began the process of rebuilding their damaged worlds, Governor Wright called a meeting of the Alliance leadership. The mood was somber despite their triumph. They had survived the Scythian threat, but at great cost. Several colony worlds had been destroyed. Millions of lives had been lost. The Council will know by now that their secret arrangement with the Scythians has failed, Wright said. They'll have to decide whether to acknowledge us as a power in our own right, or try to finish what the Scythians couldn't. Commander Frost studied the star charts showing the border between rim space and the core systems. We should prepare for the worst. The Council has more resources than the Scythians ever did. Perhaps, said William Carter with a thoughtful expression, but they also have more to lose. Their citizens don't know about their deal with the Scythians. They don't know about the systematic exile of species with potential. What would happen if that information became public throughout the core systems? Governor Wright nodded slowly, understanding the strategy Carter was suggesting. We've been thinking like exiles for too long. It's time to take the initiative. Prepare the fleet. We're going to the core. 25 years had passed since humanity's exile to the Outer Rim. The Alliance fleet now stood at the border between rim space and the core systems, a force that would have been unimaginable when the first human colonists struggled to survive. On the harsh desert world of New Horizon, the ships were a mix of designs, reflecting the combined technological heritage of 7 different species. Their hulls bore the scars of the recent conflict with the Scythians, but they had been repaired and upgraded for the journey ahead. On the bridge of the flagship Unity, formerly the Defiance but renamed to reflect the Alliance's mission, Governor Wright sat in his command chair. At 75, his body was failing him, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. Around him, a command crew composed of humans, Nixara, Tellurians, and even a few reformed Scythians worked at their stations, preparing for the most important operation in the Alliance's history. All ships report ready, Governor, said Commander Frost, now his second-in-command and likely successor. The quantum-fold drives are synchronized. We can make the jump to the core whenever you give the word. Wright nodded, looking at the main view screen where the stars of core space glittered. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, the homeworld most of them hadn't seen in a quarter century. Somewhere among those stars was the Galactic Council chamber where humanity had been sentenced to exile. We're not going as conquerors. Wright reminded everyone on the command channel that linked all ships in the fleet. "We're going as liberators. The people of the core systems are as much victims of the Council's deception as we were. Remember that when we cross the border." He gave the order, and the fleet engaged their quantum-fold drives simultaneously. Space twisted around them in ways that conventional physics couldn't explain, a combination of human theoretical insight and Nixaran navigational expertise. When the drives disengaged moments later, they had crossed a distance that would have taken Council ships weeks to travel. The Alliance's arrival did not go unnoticed. Council defense stations along the border immediately broadcast alerts. Small patrol ships moved to intercept, but kept their distance when they saw the size and composition of the Alliance fleet. Council commanders had never seen ships like these before, and their caution gave the Alliance the time they needed to implement the next phase of their plan. Diane Foster, who had replaced John Mercer as the human diplomatic representative years ago, sent a message to every communication channel in the core systems. The message bypassed official Council filters using technology developed by the Tellurians specifically for this purpose. On thousands of worlds, billions of citizens suddenly received an unexpected broadcast. "People of the core systems," Diane began, her face appearing on screens across the galaxy. 25 years ago, the Galactic Council exiled humanity and many other species to the Outer Rim, claiming we were dangerous and unpredictable. What they didn't tell you was that they have been systematically exiling any species that showed too much technological potential, keeping the core systems under their exclusive control while paying tribute to the Scythian Empire to raid and terrorize the Rim worlds. The broadcast continued, showing evidence recovered from Council and Scythian data cores, records of secret meetings, tribute payments, and deliberate manipulation of information. The response was immediate and dramatic. On dozens of core worlds, citizens began demanding answers from their representatives. Council communication channels were flooded with inquiries and protests. The Council's initial military response was disorganized and ineffective. Their ships, while numerous, were based on technology that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. When they encountered the Alliance's quantum-fold drives and advanced weapon systems, many Council captains surrendered rather than fight what they saw as a superior force. On the Council homeworld of Zentara, the ruling body convened an emergency session. The 7 counselors who had once seemed so powerful and untouchable now appeared confused and frightened. Reports from across their territory showed popular uprisings on dozens of worlds, while military commanders were refusing to attack the Alliance fleet without more information. "How did this happen?" demanded Counselor Zithal, the same silver-skinned being who had pronounced humanity's exile 25 years earlier. They were supposed to die out there, fighting among themselves or falling to the Scythians. "The humans united the exiled species instead of competing with them," replied the Council's intelligence director. "They shared knowledge instead of hoarding it. They created something new instead of trying to recreate what they had lost." A junior aide rushed into the chamber with urgent news. "The Alliance fleet has entered orbit around Zentara. They're requesting to address the Council directly." Hours later, Governor Wright entered the Council chamber, the same room where humanity had been sentenced to exile. He walked slowly, supported by a mobility aide, but his eyes were clear and his voice strong as he addressed the 7 beings who had once sealed his people's fate. 25 years ago, I stood in this room and listened as you condemned my species to what you thought would be a slow death," Wright said. "Today I return not for revenge, but to unite a divided galaxy against threats you've hidden from your own people." Council Chairperson Zolthip, a being of living crystal who had replaced the previous chair a decade earlier, responded with surprising humility. "The methods of the previous council were misguided. We see that now. What do you propose?" "The dissolution of the Galactic Council," Wright answered simply. "In its place, we will establish a galactic confederation, a true federation of equals where innovation is celebrated rather than controlled, and where the combined strengths of diverse species create a whole greater than the sum of its parts." The negotiations lasted for weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. With popular support across both core and rim worlds, and with military superiority demonstrated during brief conflicts with Loyalist Council forces, the Alliance position prevailed. The Galactic Council formally dissolved, replaced by a new governing structure that gave equal representation to all species, whether they had been core residents or exiled to the rim on Earth, now once again connected to the wider galaxy. Celebrations marked the official inauguration of the Confederation. The skyline of Geneva, once the headquarters of the United Earth Government, now hosted representatives from dozens of worlds. Ships from across the galaxy filled the skies, a sight that would have seemed impossible to the humans who had been forced to flee their colonies. 25 years earlier, as night fell over the new Confederation headquarters, Greg Martinez, a young lieutenant who had been born in exile, stood on a balcony with his grandfather, one of the original exiles who had survived the harsh early years on New Horizon. "They meant to break us," the old man said, looking up at the stars now filled with ships from dozens of worlds. "Instead, they forced us to become stronger than they could imagine." Greg nodded, watching representatives from former council worlds mingling with rim species. "Exile wasn't our end," he replied. "It was our beginning." In the vast chamber of the new Confederation Assembly, the former Rim Alliance and Core Systems delegates stood together as equals. Humanity, once exiled to the galaxy's forgotten edges, had not only survived, but had transformed the very definition of civilization. The first act of the new Confederation was to commission a memorial to those who had died during the exile and the subsequent conflicts. The second was to establish open scientific exchange between all member species, ending centuries of technological suppression. Governor Wright, officially retiring from his position to serve as an advisor to the new government, gave his final public address to a chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy. His voice, though weakened by age, carried the weight of someone who had witnessed history unfold and helped shape it. "We stand here today not because we conquered our enemies, but because we recognized that our true strength lies in cooperation rather than conflict. The Council tried to divide us by our differences. We united around the things we share in common: the desire to explore, the drive to improve, the need to protect our families and build a better future for our children." As Wright stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause, he caught the eye of Councillor Zithal, now serving as a regular delegate from his homeworld. The former councillor gave a small nod of acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. In that moment, the journey that had begun with exile came full circle. The plaque at the assembly entrance, crafted from metals mined in the rim and the core alike, bore a simple inscription in multiple languages from across the galaxy: "United by adversity, strengthened by diversity, bound by a common future."